Hello and welcome to Sterling Armory's YouTube channel. My name is Chris, and this is the first of our vlogs. Today we're going to be covering, if you follow our YouTube page, our Facebook page, I just recently dropped a lot of images from our visit to the Art Institute of Chicago, which is a fabulous museum for arms and armor. And the curators there are doing a fantastic job. Jonathan Tavares, a big shout out to him. He is a gem of a human being, and he graciously spent a lot of time with us. So I wanted to cover that today in a video and kind of go through, our visit and what we got a chance to see. And also, we got a lot of questions with some of those images that we dropped, so I wanted to cover some of that too. If you're new to the channel, my name is Chris. I'm an aerospace engineer by trade, but my love and hobby, the favorite thing ever, is making swords. And so I created Sterling Armory. And Sterling Armory is myself, Josh Warbear, and Colton. And we all make swords. And our YouTube channel here talks about everything sword related. We have a couple different series on here from our Sword Talk podcast. This vlog is new. We have series on how we make swords. We have series on terminology and oak shot terminology for swords, for medieval swords, if I can talk right. So a lot of different series if you're new to the channel. So please check it out. For today, so a lot of the questions we were getting on our museum stuff is one, people are not quite sure how to get to museums, and they think it's very difficult to be able to get to museums and see pieces, not just physically, but also online. There's a lot of questions on, hey, how do I find this sword? Are there images available of historic pieces? And also, we post a lot. I mean, we post literally hundreds of pictures from each of our museum visits. And people ask, like, well, where do we find this? So there's somewhat common questions, and it's actually very easy. So I am surprised that the questions come up, but they do come up. So I wanted to cover that. So first thing we're going to dive into is the Chicago event. So real quick, the way I'm going to do this today is we get a big question often. So I guess not really a big question, but it's a common question, I should say, where we have a lot of folks who are not on Facebook, which I understand, but you do not have to be on Facebook to go to our Facebook page. So we have a lot of questions and emails about, hey, I'm trying to find you. Your Facebook or your web page is down. Where do we find you? And when I respond with, well, you can find us on Facebook, they say, well, I'm not on Facebook. I don't have a Facebook login, so I can't get to your page. Well, that's not true. So let me walk through that real quick. So let me pull up. Yeah, so the URL at the bottom there is actually slightly wrong. So it's facebook.com/Sterling Armory. There should not be a .com after that, though. So apologies, I didn't notice that earlier. That's actually been up for over a year now. So I need to fix that. Just don't have the following .com. So I go up here and I go on my URL and I'm typing in facebook.com/Sterling Armory, and it brings you to this page. It's asking you to log in, but you do not have to. So all you do is go up to that little X off, and you are in our Facebook page that has all of our info, but you don't have to be logged in to Facebook. So real quick, this is our page, and these are some of the images from our latest Chicago, the Art Institute of Chicago visit. And I wanted to kind of start today by going over those, but we're also going to dive into some other museum stuff as well. So to find all of our images that catalog historical swords and things that we use for inspiration for making our blades, if you go to our photos section, and then you see everything there, but go to albums, you can see my mouse here. So in the albums, there are albums for every museum that we visited. So Art Institute of Chicago starts with an A, so it's up front. So we've got 154 images of pieces there, so it's a lot. But then we also have the Royal Armories in Leeds. I have over 600 pictures from Leeds, and that's probably the biggest museum. I think it's the biggest in the world for arms and armor. I know it's the biggest I've visited. We also have almost 500 images from the Met. We have over 200 images from the Wallace collection, the Tower of London, and then a number of other museums and castle armories here. So we have loads of images of historical pieces that we use for inspiration on making our blades. So if you ever want to dive into our page, again, our Facebook page is not just for our swords and armor that we make, but it's also for all the studies and stuff that we do. So it's a great resource for loads of images of historical pieces. So let's dive into that Art Institute real quick. So one thing I wanted to cover was, again, thanks very much to the curators at the Arms and Armor, and also thanks, a big call out to Craig from Arms and Armor. If it wasn't for Craig, he's the one who kind of hooked me up with Jonathan from the Art Institute. So big thank you to Craig and the whole Arms and Armor team. They have a museum themselves, so the Oakeshott Institute, which I also have images of. I don't have that many, but it's another great a museum that's U.S. based that has a lot of historical pieces to study. But yeah, they hooked me up with Jonathan Tavares, who's doing really great things at the Art Institute of Chicago. And we were fortunate enough to get some behind the scenes tours and also get some hands-on studying of some certain pieces. So I wanted to show some images from behind the scenes that if you were to go to the museum normally, you wouldn't get a chance to see. But there are tons of images from the museum as well that are available to you to see. And then I'm going to show you how to get to those without even leaving your couch. So, and I'm going to show that for each museum as well. So let's dive into some pieces that we studied directly. So first one, so this was a beautiful, let me blow it up here. Didn't really blow it up, did it? So again, I'm not logged into Facebook. We're just looking at the album from outside. So a beautiful type 15A blade. So this blade is a beautiful example that is very, very similar to the one in the Royal Armories that is currently now being replicated by Windlass. So Matt Easton worked with Windlass to replicate the Royal Armories, Royal Armory swords. And this is very similar to the one, to the 15A that they're replicating currently from the Royal Armories. However, this is actually a beefier blade. It's roughly the same length, but just as an example, again, we took tons of measurements. I got them all scribed down here. The downside to my visit this time was so usually when I visit museums to study pieces directly, in the past, museums are like, hey, don't bring your own tools because we have our own instruments. We don't want your tools scratching or marking up our pieces. So we prefer to use our own, which I understand. So the last several museums I've been at, I just haven't brought my own tools. So I didn't bring them here. But we did not have a scale this time. So I wasn't able to physically weigh the pieces. They did have a set of calipers I could use, which is great. So I did take measurements, but I was not able to take weights. So I will have to go back for that. But so just as an example, so the Royal Armories piece, I believe the base of that starts at 0.3839. I don't recall, somewhere in that area. So this particular base is almost a half-inch thick. It's at 0.47 at the base. That is a beastly thick spike of a blade. And then all the way down at the tip, it's still over a quarter-inch thick at 0.27 thick. So that is a bit beefier than the Royal Armories example. And, it's also heavier for it. So the blade length and the hilt length are about the same. It's just a thicker piece. So it's definitely meant for armor fighting. And it is a great example of that type. So the next one, here's some other images of it. So we get to see the pommel on that huge chunky pommel that counterbalances that massive thick blade. I believe the weight on this is somewhere in the mid 4 pounds. So probably 4 pounds, 7-8 ounces is my guess. And that's just from feeling it though, because I wasn't able to directly weigh it. So at some point we'll get that weighed. That's me looking at it. So that's the back room. So here's another. The next blade we got a chance to look at, which was a Type 17 out of the Alexandria arsenal, which is also a very stiff, beefy blade. So this is a Type 17. So nice big round pommel. It's extremely flat but large compared to the size of the blade, which is quite interesting. And the blade itself, again, was very thick at the base, very little distal taper to the midpoint, and then from the midpoint down, it tapers down to about an 1/8 inch. So still relatively thick for that type of sword. So it is. I believe this sword was also a little over 4 pounds, but a good armor fighting piece. Type 17s are usually pretty stiff anyway. So a couple more examples of that one. The interesting thing. Before we get to the Swiss saber, there. The interesting thing with the Alexandria pieces, and I'm curious if this is documented, but every one that I've looked at, which is I think 7 or 8 pieces now from the Alexandria arsenal, all of their round pommels are slightly off to one side, and they seem to all be slightly off relatively the same amount. So there's a piece here, there's a couple pieces in the Met, but they're all off the same way. I'm curious if that's just the pieces I've studied, or if that's consistent among the Alexandria arsenal pieces, and if so, I wonder why that is. If you know, if you're watching and you know the answer to that, it'd be great to know. I'm not familiar with that. I'm sorry, I'm not familiar with a reason for why that would be. But they are all offset. They're not directly straight on the tanks. So the next piece I got a chance to study after the Type 17 was a beautiful Swiss saber. And this Swiss saber is... I still consider these two-handed falchions. I'm still not sure why in our modern nomenclature we don't call it a two-handed falchion. Some people say no, it's a Swiss saber. Does the terminology really matter? Not really, but I would think from ease of defining blades in order just to talk, right, to communicate about what a piece is. I would think so. When you look at a longsword with a simple guard and pommel, it's a longsword. Later on in the 1600s and after, the longsword guards start getting complex, but it's still a longsword. The name of it doesn't change. So for a two-handed saber or a two-handed falchion, if you were to make this a simple guard and pommel but the same blade, then that would be a two-handed falchion. So the fact that it has a complex guard on it, yes, it's a Swiss saber, but is it not also a two-handed falchion? I would think it would be. Regardless, again, terminology not important. That's just something in my head. I love this blade. I actually make a version of this blade. Mine is based on more on the one in the Met. So the blade's a little bit wider, but it's just a gorgeous piece. I got a chance to study this one as well as a Victorian fake with a similar hilt, different blade, but similar hilt. And you can tell the Victorian fake like right away. So just by looking at them, you can't really see if you're a couple feet away, but when you get up close and you pick them up, the weight of the Victorian one is so much heavier than the original piece here. So it was really good to be able to compare and contrast them next to each other. So that's a Swiss saber. Again, absolutely beautiful piece. I hope to make one similar to that soon. Although I haven't done a complex hilted falchion in a while, I definitely want to do that. So more images there. Again, all these images are available for everyone on our Facebook page. And again, you don't need to be logged into Facebook to see them. So this other one here, this is an interesting piece I wanted to show. This is it looks like a dagger, right? But it's actually a folded up compass. So it is a compass that breaks down, or folds up, into a dagger. And yes, the dagger points are definitely sharp. The edges, not so much, but it would do damage. It's a very beefy piece. So my engineering brain was quite excited to study this piece. I believe this dates back to, I can't remember, 14 or 1500s. Or it could have been 16. But it was a really gorgeous piece, and the handwork done on it was just exquisite. So yeah, the last blade I got a chance to study was this one. It's a Type 18. However, the hilt is not original. But the blade itself was what really interested in me. So I asked him to pull this one. This one was actually in the back. It wasn't on display at the time. So it was in the back. But the blade itself is dated to, I think, 1538. So it's a beautiful Type 18 blade from the 1500s. Just the hilt had to have been redone at some point. So the hilt is not original. but the blade was very deeply hollow ground. Let me see if I can get a full picture of it here. There we go. So the blade was very deeply hollow ground, which is really interested me, and its transition to the tang was a little different than what I'm used to seeing on historical Type 18s. So the whole piece was very interesting to see. I was curious if that date on the blade was a fake, but apparently it's not. They think it's authentic. They think the whole blade's authentic, just the hilt obviously was somewhat different originally. So really cool blade to see. Very light for its size too, extremely light. Some more images of that. We also got a chance to look at some historical scabbards, which was great. So this one is a rondelle scabbard. So seeing the original leatherwork intact is not common at all. So it was great to see. They had a number of scabbards actually that were neat to see. And we also had that was a rondelle that went with it. Dagger that I loved. This particular dagger intrigued me because I love the ricasso on it, the triple fullers in the ricasso, and the total grip design, which is really cool to see. Here's another bullock dagger. What was a giant spike with a massive ricasso, which I thought was very interesting as well. I might be making one of those at some point soon because it's a very interesting and unique design that I don't think we've seen in a while. The handle looks very uncomfortable, but it's actually not. The handle is actually quite comfortable. And more behind the scenes stuff. So let's see if I can find any more. Oh, almost missed it. We have one more scabbard there that I just about passed. So this was a unique scabbard. Oh, so anytime this pops up and you're not logged in, just hit the X. It goes right back. So this scabbard is actually an original. They think it's an original scabbard, but the scabbard goes to a greatsword that's hanging on the wall in their main galley. And this scabbard, again, really cool to see original pieces, how thin the wood is and the leather over top of it. So very cool to see that. And the last piece that we looked at, one of our makers, I didn't mention earlier, Thomas, he's actually up in Illinois now. He's a big fan of executioner blades. And they did have one. So I got a chance to study this. They believe this one is more of an ornamental piece. However, it was built like it was meant to be used. So the distal taper on the blade was very common from executioners I've studied before. So within this first 10 to 12 inches where the fuller is, there's a lot of distal taper there. And then the blade is pretty thin and kind of flattens out for the remainder of the blade, but it's a very functional piece. It would definitely do chopping very well. So it was very cool to see that one in person. And I got all these images for Thomas. So Josh Warbear and Colton have also done some executioners lately, though those are more on the fantasy side. One of them might be making one like this soon. All right, so let's dive into some other images. So here's more of that Type 15 and then the Type 15 handle, and then Type 17. So see that pommel is slightly off-centered. So yeah, that's why. So the other thing I wanted to show you, so when you go to the museum's website directly with the Art Institute of Chicago, Jonathan's doing such good work that they have a ton of pieces on loan. And for the pieces on loan, those are not available on the website because they don't own them. However, I do have images here of those pieces as well. So a couple of them here. So this is another Alexandria Arsenal piece. And if you're familiar with the one in the Met, which is a very famous piece, this is a sister piece to that. It's very similar. The only difference is the inset and the pommel. The blade looks a bit thinner. Certainly the center ridge of the blade is not as well defined as it is on the Met version. But that is there. There's another piece in the back there on loan, arming sword. But all the pieces they've gotten, and I took an image of the description as well. All the pieces that they've been able to get in their museum really brings the Art Institute of Chicago up a notch. They actually, I could be wrong here, but just from experience from both the Met and the Art Institute of Chicago, I believe Chicago has more medieval blades overall. At least their display seems that way, as opposed to the Met, whereas the Met has a little bit of medieval blades, but the majority of their collection is in the Renaissance. So if you're interested in medieval blades, I think the Met has more. I could be wrong there. I'm sorry, not the Met. The Art Institute of Chicago has more. in terms of medieval blades. I could be wrong, but the Met might have a bunch in the back that they don't have on display. But as far as the overall displays, it just felt like Chicago had more. I recommend go to both. There's another blade that I have on loan. This is also a sister piece to the one at the Royal Armories and at the Met, which are those giant two-handed Type 18s. So this one is just a little bit smaller than the one at the Royal Armories, and this is another piece that Windlass is making for the Royal Armories that Matt Easton worked with. So this is kind of a sister blade to that, just a little bit smaller. But if you're familiar with that Windlass piece, you can see the resemblance. So very cool to see that one in person. Another arming sword, Type 18. So if you know me, I love Type 18 blades, so I was really geeking out over all this and trying not to look like Ron Swanson. That's all gigging, when I was looking at these blades. So very great experience. So that is our, just wanted to cover some of those. But again, that's our photo album just from the Art Institute of Chicago. So if you're interested in other museum pieces and how to find them, and you're not able to get to them in person, again, just go to our photo albums and check them out. So, we have the Royal Armories there, the Met, etc., like I talked about earlier. Now, if you want to go to the museums directly, is that difficult and see the images directly? Well, it's actually not. It's actually quite simple, and we've had this question a lot. So let's jump over to this is the Art Institute of Chicago's direct website. So if I wanted to find swords in their collection, how do I do it? Well, it's actually quite simple. So you jump over to their search, type in sword, hit enter, and whenever it catches up, there we go. There you go. So that's all you have to do. And every image from their collection of pieces in their collection that they are allowed to show is here on there. So one piece I definitely wanted to show off was this guy here, this hand and a half sword from the 1520s. This is a piece that I saw on display. They weren't able to pull it off display because of it's on top of a knight in armor, on top of a horse, which is a beautiful display in their main gallery. Incredibly, you can see the full images on our page there. But to be able to get that off would be really difficult. But the sword itself, this was Jonathan's one of his favorites, he said as well. And this is one that I would really like to recreate. So when I first saw this piece, it looked like an older blade with a later period hilt. But they do believe it's all original. So that got me even more interested to see, okay, I want to see how this thing feels dynamically, if it feels more like a later time period piece or if it feels like an older, because the blade looks like a Type 12 blade. But I'm really curious to see what it feels like dynamically. So I do want to take a shot at making this. However, I do have to figure out how to get better dimensions on it. So quite cool. Very unique piece. But there's tons of pages here on all their, so you can just go, page for page here and go through their collection. So it's that simple. So we jump over to the Met. The Met's very similar. So if you want to go to the Met's collection, so the Met, both Chicago, Art Institute of Chicago and the Met obviously have much larger collections than just swords. But for us, we're interested in swords. So if you wanted to find all the pieces, all the swords in the Met, you go over here, click search. And again, just type in sword. And there you go. So literally hundreds of swords. So you could spend hours on the websites studying these pieces, and they usually give the description of the piece that's at the museum itself, as well as some stats. And the Chicago Museum does this as well. I forgot to mention that, but they do provide stats. So if you look at this sword here, this is a very famous sword that a lot of folks emulate or try to replicate. But this is from the Met, and here's a description of the blade. I will say, so they give the length, the weight, everything, which is very detailed. However, I do think the length of the blade, they have it 32 inches. I'm going off memory, but I want to say that that's actually not correct. I think it's a little longer than that. But everything else is correct. So jumping back to the Art Institute, because I forgot. So if we go back to this piece here, again, they give the description. They go into a little bit of details, and they also give the measurements. The nice thing with the Art Institute of Chicago, the measurements that I checked so far, they've all been dead on accurate. So Jonathan, doing the measurements for that group, is doing a really good job. Back to the Met. So again, tons of pieces in the Met to study. You can go through piece by piece. And if you hit show more, I mean, literally hundreds and hundreds of pieces to go through. Or is it just as easy at other museums? So the Art Institute of Chicago and the Met are probably the easiest. When you go over to the Royal Armories, there's a little bit more tricks, but it's not hard at all. So if you were to just go up to your search function and type in sword, you're not going to find swords. It's not going to work that way. So what you have to do is you go to so you click. I must have already done it. So you click Objects and Stories. Then you go to Collections. That takes you to a whole separate page. That's the Royal Armory's collections page. So it's actually a different website that houses their full collections. And now you're in this area. So you're already seeing their armor here. But you can search anything here now to search their collections. So let me hit OK on their cookies. So yeah, type in sword, hit enter, and there you go. So now you have access to all the images that they have cataloged for all their swords in their collection. And if you notice, there's a Strider sword there. So what's cool about the Royal Armories is they do have all of the original Lord of the Rings swords that Peter Lyon did. So you can also see the stats on those as well. So again, literally thousands of blades to scroll through. You can spend days just researching pieces here online. So again, if you're not able to visit these museums, this is a great resource that I feel like a lot of people ask about how to get to it. Maybe they don't know how to get to it. It's not very difficult to get to, and lots of studying is available there. So yeah, just a little bit more steps to get to the Royal Armories one. Another example of the Wallace collection. So the Wallace collection is also a little different. It's not as direct. So if you just go to search and you type in sword, you're not going to find swords. But to the right of that, you'll see search the collection. And so you click the arrow button here, and this takes you again to a different website that houses their collection. So over in the UK, it seems like you have a museum website and then you have a collection website. So it's a little like a second step there, a little extra step. So the Wallace collection is also, it's a private museum, so their search capability is actually a lot more intricate. So you can type in collection if you know what it's based on, if you know the artist or maker, the title, the object name. Again, Wallace collection has more than arms and armor, right? So there's a lot of things that you can search here. But for us, we're just searching swords. So you can just do a general search, go into swords, hit search, and voila. There is access to everything that the Wallace collection currently has images of. So they won't have images of everything. They're still working on that. Last time I was there was, I think, 2, maybe 3 years ago? I can't remember now. David Edge was still working at the time. I don't think he's there anymore. And they were working on doing, video cataloging or image cataloging of everything. But, they did say they don't have everything captured, but a lot of it. So literally hundreds of images to go through. And maybe they have all of them by now. I'm not sure, but you can just keep hitting next and they just keep coming up. So if you want to see rapiers or long swords or arming swords, most pieces that you can see on display, you can find here. So again, very valuable resources if you are interested in studying historical pieces. So I hope that this has been interesting, and thanks for jumping on, and enjoy if you're still with us. This is our first vlog. We're going to do a lot more vlogs. We have one already underway that I started where I'm making basically a museum-like display cabinet for my pieces that are currently just scattered in the background. So I want to make a nice display. I'm in the middle of making it. It's not done yet. So we're doing a vlog for that. And then we'll probably every tournament and every event that we go to, we'll probably do a vlog for that as well. So yeah, thanks for joining us. I hope this was interesting. I hope this was informative for those that have asked about this sort of thing. And yeah, hope you enjoyed the video. It's run a little long, so I'm probably going to cut it off there. But thanks for joining me. And any questions or any input on anything below, please provide below. And we will catch you guys next time.